Next slide, please. So for today's workshop, let me give you a brief overview, like what will be happening in the hour and a half. We will have our first guest speaker, Nicole. She is a candidate certificate counselor, and she is our newly embedded counselor for both the Faculty of Forestry and Faculty of Land and Food System. So please type in during the workshop, type in any question that you may have in the chat, and Nicole will be able to address them throughout the presentation or at the end. And following that, we have Ams Peer Support, who will introduce strategies to combat burnout. And at the end, we will just finish with a feedback survey. And without further ado, I will pass the floor to our first guest speaker for today, Nicole.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm really happy to be here, and I hope you can all see and hear me well enough. Thank you for the introduction, Melinda. I am the new embedded counselor within the Faculty of Land and Food Systems and also for forestry students. So this is a new role, obviously, and I was asked to be part of this workshop with a whole bunch of sort of topics that we could address, which is really exciting for me, and I'll try to limit myself to my time constraint, which is difficult when I start talking about mental health. So thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to try and screen share so that I have a little presentation to sort of guide my conversation. So as the newly embedded counselor, the first thing that I want to say is that I'm available for one-on-one bookings. My schedule has just opened up. And I'll mention the process now and then at the end of my sort of presentation so that you know. We're having students call counseling services so that you can actually identify yourself as an LFS student and ask for an appointment with me. My wait list is like 0 right now. So if you're looking for mental health support one-on-one or just sort of connection with resources, I'm really happy to meet with you. And especially at this time of year, right? Like I think that that it's nice to know where you can reach out, and then I will sort of connect you with some resources that if you need something more immediate, like tonight after this workshop, then I can give you something that you could use. As I mentioned, I had some of the LFS ACE exec, like Tim, send out some questions on what you were looking for in this workshop, and the list is really long and varied. I will try my best to capture, as much as possible. I need to flip to my next screen, but I can't do it. So I need to stop the screen share and figure out how to do that. Okay. You know what? I'm so sorry. I'm new to screen sharing with my presentation, and I just don't know. That doesn't look very good, does it? While I'm figuring this out, I want you to feel comfortable to message me privately in the chat function as well. So it's important for you to message everyone if you feel like you have a question or you have something that you want to say. But feel free, if you feel a bit hesitant, to have everyone know who you are and what you're asking, to send it to me privately. I just want to create a space for us, even though we're online and virtually, it's a bit awkward to create a space that you would normally do in person. But I want to make sure that we're all on the same foundation to what we're going to talk about today. And this extends beyond sort of what I'm speaking about, I would think, because it's such a vulnerable topic, and some of what you shared in terms of feedback you were hoping to get, or some ideas you were hoping to get. I think that I wanted to set the tone for sharing, that we're in a safe space, that what we say here today or what you hear stays in this space, that we accept diversity and difference in thoughts and opinions, and that we can just share openly and hopefully learn from other people, right? I want to take a little poll while I figure out how you're doing really. So what I would like you to do is, if you have your phone, to take a picture of the QR code, and I'm going to pull up the screen share of how we're feeling today. So this is anonymous, and I think it just comes in, and I'm going to share our answers. So feel free to, we've got that. And if you don't have the, I'm going to try and chat. If anybody's a problem with finding the poll through their QR code, I can send the link as well. Just pop me a little message. I'll give us a minute or two here to sort of figure out how we're feeling, and then share it with everyone. You can answer more than once if you like as well. So I'm not sure if the words that show up bigger are from more than one person answering. Slide, is it? Yeah, thanks, Tim. Okay. So I see some themes coming out. If there's any last thoughts on describing your mental health, feel free to. Survival mode, yeah. Great. Exhausted, yeah. That seems to be the biggest one. Makes the most sense to me as well. Great. Okay, so I think I'll go back to, if you're done there, that's a really cool snapshot. If anybody wants to take a screenshot of that to sort of reflect a little bit later on how we're doing. Let's go back to how we are. So it feels like, you know, a lot of what you're feeling, other people are feeling the same way, which is comforting in a way, but also doesn't really lend as much to the feelings of isolation that you can get when you feel these things. One of the words that kept coming up and that I had been asked to present on is anxiety, and I wanted to take a minute to just bring it back to basics. I like doing this in a workshop so that, you know, it's not just me talking at you and telling you all sorts of things that you probably already know physically in your body. And it feels like a lot of the anxiousness and the stress and the overwhelm can be linked back to that anxious feeling, but also to feeling exhausted. So, you know, when I'm tired, I realize, and it's funny because I'm with you on the exhausted. My daughter woke me up before 5 o'clock in the morning today. So I have been running on empty all day. And it's a nice reflection for me to pause and think, you know what, sleep is actually the basis of everything. So I wish I had a whole slide on sleep and sleep hygiene, as we call it, but I'm starting to see that maybe we could have another workshop just devoted to sleep. But let's take a minute to just look at some of the themes that come out when we say that we're feeling anxious. So this could be anxious about, some of the comments that I had seen are exam stress and anxiety, and also anxiety about social reentry, being with other people, like how to interact again. Anxiety about the future. Usually it's the future or the past, not really based in the present moment. What I wanted to offer with this, does anybody have any thoughts right now when they see this slide? Does it make you feel anxious to even just look at this? Any comments or thoughts on that? or things you want to add to the list. So what I would like to do is to take a little moment and have a grounding exercise for all of us. I don't know how many of you have actually moved into working with the breath and the physical body. What I find from my work is that anxiety is like a moving target. We feel very alone when we start to get these feelings like nobody understands. So bringing ourselves down off of the high of anxiety, that sort of fight, flight, or freeze mode, which I'm not going to get into because I have a feeling most of you understand that anyways, if not all of you. When we move into the physical body, it's telling us what's going on. So if we can start to notice the signs before we get to a highly anxious state, then we can start to work with it. It might not go away at first or for a while, but once we start to become aware of what's happening in our body, then we gain a hold over it, if that makes sense. So starting to notice these triggers. Sleep is the number one. And having anxiety when you're not rested just amplifies everything. So what I would like to do for all of us, without further ado, is if you're sitting somewhere, if you want to turn your screen off, or if you want to turn your video off while you do this, feel free so that you can feel like you've got a little bit more of a private space. But what I would like you to do is situate yourself wherever you're sitting in a comfortable way, whether that's having your back all the way back into the chair you're sitting and your hips are nice and even on the chair that you're sitting on. So if your legs are crossed, you can keep them there or you can take them with your feet equally on the floor. And notice the bottom of your back, like your lower back. If it's sort of rolled back in the chair, try and encourage yourself to sit up a little bit so that you can move back in the chair and your whole spine is supported by the chair behind you. And what I'm going to ask you to do if you feel comfortable is to close your eyes. So this is like a real slowing down, which when you're feeling anxiety, this is really difficult to do. So if it feels better and you're agitated to just keep your eyes open, that's fine. But what I would like us to do is start to feel like we can move back in space. When I work with people, I notice anxiety really folds the inside of the chest and the front body. It's like we're hunched in on ourselves, which does not help us to take a deep breath. So when we sit back and we notice how long the space is underneath our collarbones and how long the space is at the upper back, we can start to get a deep breath. So if you'd like to go ahead and close the eyes, I'm going to just allow you a moment to feel like there's a heaviness in the body. If you're tired, that's not so hard to do, right? I want you to feel like the back is supported by the chair behind you and your hips are supported by the chair underneath you, and that your feet are connected to the ground so that you're bringing your energy level down. When you breathe in, I want you to breathe in through your nose. And I want you to feel like there's a cool sensation on the upper lip when you breathe in. Fill up the lungs like you're filling a balloon with air. And then as you exhale, it comes back out the nose. The upper lip feels warm. And the balloon of the lungs just starts to relax. So we're going to do this a few more times. Take a nice breath in. Fill up the lungs like an umbrella, opening up wide. And then exhale, relax the lungs. The umbrella comes back down towards itself. Take another breath in. Feel the front, the sides, and the back of the rib cage opening up. And exhale, everything in the body relaxes. The shoulders slide down away from the ears. The back of the neck becomes long. And the whole mask of the face just softens. Let's try this a few more times. Take a nice breath in. Fill up the lungs like an umbrella, and exhale, relax the shoulders, the jaw, the muscles around the eyes. Just feel yourself noticing the breath cooling the upper lip when you breathe in, entering the lungs, and then as you breathe out, it passes over the upper lip and warms that space. Great. So from here, we're going to let go of the breath practice. And I want you to just stay where you are. You don't have to move. You can slowly blink the eyes open. And I want you to just notice how you feel now, whether it's tired. Maybe you can add some comments in the chat function of how that made you feel. So I will keep my eye out for some of the ways that you might have experienced that in your body. So like I was saying, with anxiety, moving into the body and noticing the cues from your physical body, I think is the most helpful. That'll give you the most direct link to what's exactly going on in your body. So when I read things in the comments that you've left of what you would like to be captured, when I think about being in a social setting with somebody else and feeling quite anxious about interacting with them, whether it's you feel awkward in that moment, you're not quite sure how to like start a conversation or what's appropriate to say, or how close do you get, all of those anxious feelings in that situation, as well as when you're completely nervous about failing an exam and worried academically, it's the same physical feeling, right? So if we can have a bit of a tool, I hope that I offered you something there that helps you to check in with yourself. I can't see comments, and I don't know, are there any comments that people have left? I'd like to hear some thoughts. I know everybody's tired, so it's hard to come up with something.
Yes, there are quite a lot of people are saying they don't realize how many things are in the mind, and after this, it's really refreshing, and people feel composed and relaxing.
Yeah. And yet the problems that we're dealing with don't change, right? So we change accordingly. So being nervous about exams or socially interacting, it's not so much about making the situation go away. It's about you checking in with yourself so you can better approach it and better handle whatever's coming your way. I think that when we're constantly in a heightened state of awareness, like where our nervous system is really wound up, like this fight, flight, or freeze, we can become burnt out. And I don't want to talk too much about it because I know the second part of the workshop is on burnout. But I think that what that breathing practice will do, and grounding, whether you liked the breathing or whether you liked the sort of physical sensation of relaxing the body in space, maybe relaxing the shoulders, you didn't realize they were like up here the whole day, helps to calm the nervous system down. And then when we have a calm nervous system, we end up getting a better sleep, we end up having better digestion. This can all be, I think, addressed in the burnout section of the workshop, which I'm happy to jump in and share thoughts on. So I've worked a lot with this. Is there anything else with anxiety? This is like a very basic run through. Yeah, are there questions or thoughts? I can't see the chat function either, if there's any moderation or questions about that. Okay. I'm still screen sharing, right? Yes. One of the things that I wanted us to actually discuss, because I'm not an expert on this, so I'm going through the same thing, which is a really interesting stance to be in, because usually when you're a counselor, you're not necessarily going through the same thing as all of your clients, right? But in terms of setting boundaries with other people or within yourself for interacting socially, this was sort of the second part of the workshop that I was asked to speak about. I wanted to bring these questions out because there are two parts of it. So having anxiety within yourself of what do I do and how do I feel? And then also how do I then gauge what somebody else is going through and feeling? And I wanted to get some thoughts here and ask you a question, because we are all going through this. I don't necessarily think I have the answer here. I wanted to leave this open for us to hear from each other. Do you want me to do another word cloud so everybody can see it, or would you rather that we have a private chat here for this? What's the choice? I was hoping that people would actually turn their microphones off and start to talk a little bit at this point. I know you're tired, so am I, so you don't have to be necessarily coherent, but I wanted to get a gauge of what's going on here.
I'm comfortable with unmuting. I didn't know if you wanted like people to talk. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Well, let's see. I feel like my anxiety kind of comes from feeling obligated to go beyond my own boundaries for the sake of like just trying to make like a connection with someone or trying to like maintain a friendship. I either will kind of be capped out and like feel really guilty that I have to like go home for the night and kind of like miss that social interaction, or I will push myself but end up feeling really out of place, whether that be going to like a party or like part of town like I've never been, sort of thing. I don't know if that's helpful.
So it's almost like you need to have interaction and be with friends and have like a social life, but then it also, a lot of it entails you going out of your comfort zone. Am I hearing that right?
Right. And it's like finding that balance of my own boundaries with like how much can I, because I'm like experience social anxiety a lot. I'm like, how much is too much in a day where I'm just really exhausting myself, versus like how much like I think I should, how much time I should be investing in being social and being like meeting other students and things like that.
Right. The word should. I had a counselor
Yeah.
once who said, don't should on yourself. And it stuck, right? Like I thought it was pretty cute.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like, I wonder if there are also cues for you where you know that you've had enough. Like I think that we could bring it out to the group to say, I'm trying to think of a collective sort of thought distilled from what you've mentioned. Does anybody else feel the same way? Anybody else want to jump in with that? So it's almost a balance of how do I know when I've had enough, and how do I know when I should push myself or that I should be wanting to do more. Yeah. I don't know if I have the answer for that. I think that you'll have telltale signs when you've probably had enough, or that you should be saying no. And again, I think it comes back to that panicky, anxious feeling, right? With social anxiety, I think that at all times we're kind of comparing ourselves to other people, like what's enough? Am I connected enough? I want to be part of things, but I don't know if my inner self is actually telling me that's what I want right now. I think that that's a huge interplay, and then adding the pandemic on top of that and returning to things. I think that my wish is that everyone has like the ability to be connected with other people in an open way, and finding statements where it's like, I've had enough today. I just feel like I need to go home and regroup. I don't know if you were looking, Brooke, for like a specific answer, or if you just wanted to share, like, how do you sort of balance those two? Does anybody else have a thought on that?
We had a comment in the chat, Nicole. I feel a lot of these things very hard to tell when my social battery has drained.
Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden you end up in a situation where you're drained, but you haven't necessarily seen it coming. And then dealing with the backlash there. Yeah. I would probably suggest in those times to look back on patterns of when did I perhaps start to feel this, or what are some of the cues that I know from myself that I was ignoring. Like I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm usually in bed by now. This person I'm around is not the right energy for me. I need to get away from them. Usually there is a tipping point, right? I find that asking ourselves, what do I need right now, on a regular basis actually helps with that, because we can bring it back. Before the battery is fully drained, there are moments where where we are able to tune in and listen. And I think that if you're able to have some quiet moments through the day that are productive, so for checking in with yourself. So whether it's a reminder on your phone or just, you know what, I feel totally scattered. What if I took 3 deep breaths right now? And we did it together. Actually, we did more than 3 breaths, and it felt like it was a very short period of time. And I don't mean to sort of say, oh, that's going to solve all the problems, but rather it will help you to tune in with what's going on for you. And you can say, maybe my battery's like 30% on the way to being drained. So I'm going to do one more thing, or maybe I'll preserve that for myself and say no. I think that we have to normalize saying no and normalize leaving early, like leaving Zoom meetings early. I have a hard time with that. And normalize fidgeting and movement, because I feel like a lot of our lives are really centered around sitting. And I think that anxiety, a lot of the times for me personally anyways, is like, I'm an animal and I need to like move and be like, you know what I mean? Move the blood around my body. And we're just not doing that. So sometimes I find that changes the perspective and replenishes the battery. So I think knowing cues of when my battery is about to be drained, and also noticing when is it actually replenished, and then booking in that time for yourself, which sounds a lot easier said than done. What else is coming up for everyone? We're tired.
In the chat, it says they don't feel unwell until they get home, finally have a time to kind of reinforce and check on themselves.
Like as soon as I get home, that's when I check in on myself. Yeah, it's kind of like you just go into the mode of getting things done and accomplishing what you need to accomplish for the day, and then having that moment when you get home where you can finally check in and then review your day. And I think that some of the exhaustion is that we're not really processing anything until we're going to bed, right? And then we're thinking about all of the things. It's like a video playing, thinking about all of the things that we need to think about, reviewing our day, processing interactions, checking in with how we feel, wondering if other people feel the same way, wondering if we're kind of the only strange ones out there that aren't quite sure if we're okay, you know? Which I don't know if that's leading to the exhausting feeling. If the anxiety and the exhaustion are kind of going hand in hand, would you say that? Usually it's exhausting, but I wonder if it's even more so now, like those two are kind of, you know, linked for a lot of you. What about checking in with somebody else? I'll move on to the second part of the question before I kind of have a last, you know, discussion point. What about checking in with somebody else? Like, how do you, if it's somebody you know really well, I think it's fair enough to ask them, you know, you all right? Or are you comfortable with this? Or don't worry if you cancel last minute. Or how do you gauge someone else's comfort level? Or how have you been gauging someone else's comfort level? Maybe it's too much of a question to combat now because it's all so new. What do you think? No. Maybe that's something to ponder. I don't have the answers for that. I really wish I did. I wish I came to this workshop with like, here's the solution to all of these things. But I think that when we're interacting in person again, you know, some of the same things apply, right? Like some of the same cues that we would use when pre-pandemic, right? Like nonverbal communication or asking someone open-ended questions like, how are you doing? Still apply. And then I think that now we're dealing with like a general paranoia of really not knowing what another person is going through, and then us all kind of struggling behind the scenes. So that's what I mean when it's interesting that we're all going through the same thing together. I think your best defense would probably be having that check-in with yourself. If it's only at the end of the day, maybe I challenge you to bring it in at one point in the middle of the day. Even when you're on campus trying to get everything done, it's available to you. Are there any other, I have some resources that I wanted to share with you that are really quite simple. What I'll do is I'm staying for the rest of the workshop, and I'm happy to jump in. And I wanted to leave some time open for discussion, or sort of some of the more vulnerable or personal questions that you might have that you wanted to get out of this time, because it is your time now. I'm really happy to have you book a one-on-one counseling session. I've got some other resources that I wouldn't mind sharing beyond the two sort of article and workbook that I share here with these. And Beatrice also has the links for those if you can't snap the QR codes. And I have some other counseling resources available that are more immediate. So if you've heard of the Student Assistance Program, it's kind of like our sister service that you can access 24/7 in multiple different languages, and I will send the phone number for that, so it's free to you. What I offer is sort of a short-term brief counseling model where I'm able to meet with you. Sometimes all we need is like one session, right? Where we check in, you sort of have some ideas of what you want to fix or what you want to focus on, and one session kind of perks us up to keep going for the next little while. As well, meeting, more often than once. So maybe 3 to 5 sessions is usually the average. And then for longer term counseling or therapy, you've got actually this year, which I found really promising, is an increase in coverage for counseling and psychology services through AMS. So if you have not opted out of the student health plan, you have access to $1,000 over the academic year. And I'm happy to share lower cost counseling resources to you so that you're not sort of blowing the $1,000. Sometimes a psychologist could be like $220 an hour, right? Which won't get you very much. But I'm happy to share some reduced fee resources as well. And then I think, sometimes we suggest things like apps. I don't really know where you're at in terms of cluttering your space with more things and like apps and reminders of things to do. I find myself a little bit overwhelmed with that in general. So those are what my suggestion would be today, because we're not in a room together and I'm not sort of picking up on your vibes or seeing heads nodding or people able to pop in and ask in a more casual way and start some conversation. So I hope this gave you something. We have a good 5 or 10 minutes now to ask any sort of question. Now would be your time, or sort of connect with everyone to express how you're feeling. And I'll stay here. We can be quiet as well.
I saw in chat there is one comment. Since you couldn't see the chat, I will just read it out. A participant says, I often have a hard time to calm myself when I'm stressed or anxious about something, leading to a panic attack. What are some techniques one can do or one experience a panic attack alone?
Yeah, panic attacks are extremely frightening. So it's really brave to even put yourself out there. And I think that a few of you probably have the same thing. They're super frightening. And I don't want to, reduce how awful it feels to have a panic attack. I would be really happy to speak with whoever put that out there and have some counseling sessions. I think there's a lot going on with panic attacks, and it's a buildup, a huge buildup that ends up in this way. So oftentimes when we get anxiety, and it's kind of a persistent worry or negative feelings, can build up into this. And oftentimes I find with panic attacks, we can't really see them coming. And that's what makes them so scary. They can oftentimes feel like they're just coming up out of the blue. And a panic attack is, you know, it's got the scary elements. You can kind of think about sometimes when you see a movie and they're like, oh, I need to breathe into a paper bag, right? It's kind of that where all systems shut down to sort of keep you alive, right? You've got really rapid breathing. Even if you're with someone and you're like, hey, something is like really not going well. And I think that's, you have this like sense of impending doom, something is going to happen. Usually another person there, it's hard for them to understand or even relate to what you're feeling. So it's super, like you're very much alone. So I hope that by saying those things, I don't freak some of you out who haven't experienced it, but rather normalize what's actually going on. And then what happens after is because there's such a release of stress hormones and such an activation of the nervous system, we're pretty exhausted afterwards. So I think that the first thing to know with panic attacks is that the more we know about them and how you experience it in yourself, in your mind and in your body, that's a really good start. So knowing that kind of cycle, that you, when you feel it coming on, there's very little you can do to actually like bring yourself down. Another person's not necessarily going to be able to help you, but it's more of like compassion and self-care. Okay, I need to like cancel my meetings tomorrow, or can't, like maybe I won't go to campus tomorrow because I know I'm going to be really exhausted afterwards. Or I'm going to like, how do I just wind down and cancel my whole schedule? So there's a real sort of self-care and boundary setting, like, right, like my body is telling me it's too much and I need to completely wipe my schedule clear. I find that helpful. And then I think with anything, when we're talking about mental health and it's coming out in such a dramatic way, is meeting one-on-one to figure out in tandem with someone else when you're not in a panic mode, what's actually going on, because there's patterns and there's signals. It's just a matter of looking for them. And then learning some new tools or resources like the breaths that we took, relaxing this area, sitting back in the chair. You know, those are things you can do even when you feel really good. So it's almost like with anxiety, we're relearning like where that anxious voice is coming from and how we can sort of turn the volume down on it so that we don't have to go to that place. Or maybe the panic attacks happen less often, or we know some of our triggers, right? I haven't slept, I had too much coffee, I talked with that one person, it's exam time, like a little bit of a back step, right? So knowing what's coming up, I think can help mitigate them. That being said, they do tend to happen out of the blue. And I don't think that there's any shame in blaming ourselves when they happen. And I think connecting with somebody who, whether it's myself or somebody who also experiences them, is really, really, really important, because you don't feel like you're the only one going through it, because that's what anxiety is, right? Anxiety is you in isolation, dealing with an overwhelming sense that you cannot handle whatever is coming your way. I've got a breakout room notice on my screen. Should I be doing something with that?
Oh, no, it's
No.
totally fine. Yeah, that's for the Ams Peer Support.
Okay.
And thank you, Nicole. I really felt related to what you say, like how we should like step back a little bit, kind of surrounding kind of hints us what's gonna happen next, how we're gonna feel about it,
Yeah.
about the panic attack. Like I really do relate it that way as well.
Yeah.
And we
You
got,
can,
go ahead.
oh, I can see the chats now.
That's great. Yes, we got one more question as well. So Lucy is asking, can you explain how to know when you need to therapy versus an academic counselor?
Yeah. So, and that's Lucy to everyone, right? Like everyone can see that you wrote that. Do you want to like explain, come off your mute and explain a little bit more, Lucy? Like when, like, it's a pretty broad question. So I think that an academic counselor could help you with course planning, with degree requirements, with things like connecting to academic resources like past program or certain workshops. Like, I have a hard time getting on top of my schoolwork. Like, I feel like, it is intertwined with seeing a therapist or like a personal counselor. I think that when it delves into seeing a counselor might be, I just want to check in. I'm not really doing so well sometimes, or I am doing well, I want to do maybe better. Something's really bothering me. I'm having a difficult time in a relationship, or I'm unsure, of a lot of things in my life right now. Like it could be anything, right? Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think academic counselor, it's kind of in the name, right? Anything academically related. I mean, personal stuff is academically related because it's your life right now. But if you feel like an academic counselor feels like someone you see like a one-off, I have these specific questions, I need to know about an academic policy, I need to be connected with academic resources. Whereas a personal counselor is like academics and anything else. Mm-hmm. Okay, I can see your question, Brooke. Do you know if the student health plan covers therapy from private practice in Canada? Yes, it does. How do we get this covered by the health plan? So what I'll do is during the next part of the workshop, I will find the links for you and I will send them to everyone. So I will find the links to the student assistance program and then the AMS. You should use it, right? It's $1,000. I think that a lot of going rate, like the market rate for a 1 hour counselor like myself outside of the university would be like $120 to $150 an hour. So you could see that you could have 8 to 10 sessions. And then I've got some links to reduced fee sessions if you're interested in that, and you can feel free to email me. Or you can feel free to make an appointment with me and we can sort of talk through like, what do you need now? So for instance, I met with a student this past week who has had some issues ongoing, like difficulty getting motivated, feeling very tired all the time, unsure of where they're going in life, not really sure why they're here, feeling kind of, really down a lot. So what our plan was is to sort of figure out things as we go. So I'm going to meet with that person for a few sessions. We sort of had some homework in ourselves. Okay, why don't you go to your doctor and get, this checked out? Why don't you go to, check out what kind of vitamins and supplements you're taking? Like maybe there's an imbalance there. Why don't you check out the sleep clinic because they have a hard time sleeping and they have a history of disrupted sleep? And then seeing me, and then figuring out after a few sessions, maybe you need like a longer term coverage. So that's just one example of sort of what we could talk about. But I will send the links, Brooke, and I'll put them in the chat function, and then feel free to email me if you have like a further question.
Thank you, Nicole. That is really very, very informative. Yeah, I personally just doing the little exercise with you, the breathing exercise, feel a little bit calmed as well. And also those talks just make me calm down, settle down.
Yeah. And you can do it any place, anytime, right? Like we could all do it right now as we go into the next part of the session. We can lean back in our chair, feel the front of our chest opening up. We can feel our breath opening like an umbrella, the lungs and the rib cage, and then coming back down. And, even when you're with someone in person, you can do it. And it's interesting their body, what it might do too. They might say, oh yes, I can lean back and relax too, right? Like that feels good. It's really nice to see and meet everybody here. I'm going to stay in for the rest of the session. So if you have something or a private message, feel free to send it along, okay? I'll mute myself now. It's been really nice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Nicole, may I ask you to, yes.
Yeah.
So now we will transition to our second speaker that we have for today. It's the Ams Peer Support. who are introducing some strategies to how to combat burnout.
Yeah, hi, my name's Claire. I'm the team lead for dialogue team for Ams Peer Support. My two lovely volunteers, Sarah and Augustine, are going to be presenting this workshop. So yeah.
Hello, can everybody see the slide?
Yeah, I think we just have to go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's on the screen. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. You see this first slide, right?
Yeah, perfect. All right, awesome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to AMS Peer Support's Beating Burnout workshop. My name is Sarah and my pronouns are she, her.
And my name is Augustine and I go by he, him pronouns.
So this whole session will be focused on identifying burnout, what to do about it, and how university culture perpetuates it.
So here are some instructions for how to interact today. I assume most of you are familiar with Zoom after 2 years of COVID. And so basically the main ones are use the mute button when you want to speak. And you can also raise your hand, and if one of the facilitators do not notice you in about a minute, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions. And later on, you can participate by clicking view options and clicking annotate, and then you can annotate on the shared screen.
So as UBC students, the majority of us are or have been settlers in Canada, more specifically Vancouver. It is so important to recognize that UBC is located on the traditional, ancestral, and stolen lands of the Musqueam peoples. For those of you who are not of Indigenous ancestry, we challenge you to be mindful of whose land you are on, how you can be respectful on that land, and what you as an individual can do to help decolonization efforts. So the image on the left shows a house post, not a totem pole, that was gifted to UBC by the Musqueam people. It is a symbol of the Musqueam people's continued connection to their land and a sign of welcome to all visitors on Musqueam land. The two maps on the right are from nativeland.ca, which is a resource that you can use to help find whose land you are on. It is key to note that this resource is under development and may not be entirely accurate. So for example, it lists Vancouver as Chamainist territory when their territory is actually located on Vancouver Island. So Claire has kindly shared the link to nativeland.ca in the chat, so feel free to check that out. So we really hope for this workshop to be a safe learning space, and our team came up with a couple things just to ensure that that will happen. So first off, we will address accessibility needs, acknowledge the right to pass. Also, it's important to look after yourself and do what you need to do for your own mental health. If that means having to take a break or just tune out for a certain topic, that's totally okay. Your own well-being always comes first. Together, we know a lot. This means that each of us brings knowledge from our own experience. So respect that and open up to learn from one another. And do not make assumptions. As a group, we want to make this a safe learning space. And one of the ways that we can achieve this is by not making assumptions about others. Also maintaining confidentiality. This means that what is shared here stays here, what's learned here leaves here. Any personal stories or experiences that may be discussed today are not to leave this session. Instead, take with you the knowledge and skills that you learned.
So a question for all of you is, what are you hoping to learn today? Feel free to either unmute yourself or type in your responses in the chat.
I think if nobody has anything, then I guess we'll move on to the goals of the workshop today. Okay, so what we will be oh, perfect. Something in the chat here. So why do I feel stressed sometimes when I can't understand why? Okay, awesome. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I would love to know as well. So the goals of today's workshop is to define and be able to identify burnout, be able to identify sources of burnout in your life, identify the ways university culture promotes burnout, and learn strategies to prevent burnout.
So what exactly is burnout?
The World Health Organization defines burnout as a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. And this is characterized by 3 dimensions. So the first one is feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativity and cynicism related to one's job. And lastly, reduced professional efficacy.
So burnout, what is it and when does it occur? So burnout is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. And burnout occurs when one feels overwhelmed, emotionally drained, and unable to meet constant demands.
So have you ever felt burnt out? I'm sure you have. If so, when? Feel free to unmute yourself for this or just go ahead and type in the chat. Exam week, yep, 100%. Since joining a work-learn program while still doing many classes, yeah, exactly. Juggling the various responsibilities of life is 100% a source of burnout for sure. The hell week before reading break, yeah, that sucked. Those are so great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, so these are the common misconceptions about burnout. Number 1, burnout means you are weak and can't handle stress, which is not true. And number 2, burnout requires a major work or life change. And another misconception is you have to keep burnout a secret. A vacation or a day off will cure your burnout. And if you're burned out, it means you are also depressed.
So what could burnout look like as a university student? It could look like feelings of exhaustion, no motivation to do an assignment or go to class, loss of creativity, losing confidence in your abilities, inability to concentrate during lectures or when doing schoolwork, feelings of anxiety, and increased pain in your body.
So sources of burnout.
So one source of burnout is that it stems from excessive emotion work. Emotional burnout is actually the most common type of burnout, along with occupational burnout. It is defined as a state in which one feels worn out mentally because of accumulated stress from a situation or multiple situations in their personal life. This type of burnout is most common among caregivers, people who go through major life changes, those living with chronic illnesses, and those dealing with financial strain. Emotional burnout can also have many negative implications in one's life. It often results in failure to interact well with loved ones and coworkers, which may cause less support.
So it's super common to experience burnout in friendships, relationships, volunteering, activism, etc. So how do you set healthy boundaries, or what do you think are some ways that we can set healthy boundaries? And feel free to either mute yourself or type in your responses in the chat.
right, so there's some messages in the chat here. Normalizing saying no. Yes, I feel like that is probably one of the biggest ones, and one of the things that people are more often than not afraid to do. I know that I've definitely experienced that for sure. Have 30 minutes a day to relax no matter what. Yep, for sure. That's so key. We're actually going to talk about, we're actually going to mention that later. So that's awesome. Being honest with people. Yeah, I've found that sometimes that can be super difficult for me, but at the end of the day, it is quite necessary, especially to just reserve and protect your energy.
Yeah, some great responses. We'll now move on to the next slide.
So burnout is more prevalent in people who have less support by their significant others. Studies have shown that having significant others in your support circle can help decrease the negative effects of stress. It can also improve health and mental well-being. And actually, research has found that social support can lower rates of burnout in medical professionals. So it's really important to remember that you are not alone. If you ever need any kind of support, Ams Peer Support, we're always here to help you.
And we're all students, so school can most certainly lead to burnout, especially during COVID and lots of Zoom classes and screen time. And yeah, so here are some facts to know about school burnout. When stressful points of the year hit, burnout can intensify further due to student support systems also being burnt out and or less emotionally available. And this can present as no longer enjoying a course or other activities that you once did.
Awesome. So I would love for you to annotate on the scale how burnt out you are feeling from school right now. At the end of the line, it says not at all. And at the other end, it says extremely. And also, what are some ways that school is a source of burnout for you? Again, you can feel free to unmute yourself, or you can type in the chat, whatever works. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with all of those. I'm definitely on the higher end of the spectrum as well. Yeah, awesome. Oh, also, I just want to bring up a great point from Claire in the chat. They're saying, also super important to acknowledge that burnout is a term that originated from the autistic and neurodivergent community in regards to trying to meet the needs demanded from us by the neurotypical world. Very true, very true. Thank you so much, Claire, for bringing that to our attention.
And yeah, thank you everyone for annotating on the screen. I think I agree with all of you. It's been midterm season for, I guess, most of us, if not all of us, and I agree it tends to lead to a lot of burnout and stress.
So let's talk about the ways in which university culture promotes burnout. University can just make life a bubble of studying, sleeping, eating, and pretty much nothing else. So it's often really hard to notice if you're burnt out when everybody else is just doing the same thing.
And to get us to start thinking, we're going to put up some phrases on the next slide. And I want you all to read each phrase and think about whether you have heard of the phrase or have even used them yourself. And if you have, use the annotate function again to put a stamp or a mark next to the phrase that you have heard.
So we got a stamp on not going to sleep tonight. I have to finish this paper. Yep. A friend actually just did that last night when we were studying. So definitely that one's very, very common. But go to sleep. That's so important. Yeah, being busy. that you haven't eaten, yeah, that's a huge one too. Super important to eat properly throughout the day, because that is essentially what is going to fuel your brain so you can accomplish all of these things that you need to get done. Yeah, okay, so there's pretty much stamps next to every single one, and I know that I've used them all myself. So yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation.
So most of the statements that were shared on the last slide stem from hustle culture. And you have probably heard of the term hustle culture before. It's thrown a lot in university culture, especially. And basically, hustle culture is the glorification of being constantly busy, stressed, and overworked. And an important thing to note is there is a difference between working hard and hustle culture. So working hard is great. You can pursue what you love, and being stressed, you may be stressed now and then, and school is hard, but we're taking care of ourselves and we're making healthy choices. Whereas in hustle culture, we tend to glorify the unhealthy behaviors that are often accompanying school, so much that other students strive to follow the example because they think it'll lead to success. And I guess hustle culture can be more prevalent in quote unquote prestigious programs such as quote unquote pre-med, pre-law, or whatever those programs may be. And hustle culture is overall expressed as biting off more than you can chew and taking on too many responsibilities, so much that that something that most people can't handle. And so, for example, taking on too many extracurriculars, volunteering, and taking more challenging courses. And one of the worst things about hustle culture is that it's often fear-based performance, meaning you are working hard just to keep up with others rather than out of your own drive and interests. And interestingly, this attitude can actually make you more prone to burnout. And yeah, so that's basically sort of what hustle culture is. And if anyone has something they would like to share about their personal experience with hustle culture, feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat.
Yeah, I know for me, I'm in science. I'm doing kind of a competitive science degree, and I'm not pre-med, but I know a lot of my friends are. And it is a grind that I do not subscribe to. So it is pretty consistent having people around me just being like constantly, I'm volunteering for this lab and I'm doing this and I'm doing all of these things. And I'm like, well, I got out of bed this morning and I'm going to call it a win.
That's awesome, Claire. I totally feel that.
Okay, if no one else has anything to share, I guess we can move on to the next slide.
So social media is not real, which we all know, but following hustle Instagram pages can give people the impression that an overworked and stressful life is part of the university student experience. This is especially common with when people have accounts that have like rags to riches stories or whatever. And those often give the impression that these people are superhuman and that the only way to success is to work yourself to the absolute limit, which is definitely not the way to success.
And the important thing to know about hustle culture is that no one person is responsible for propagating hustle culture. In fact, I'm sure most of us in this presentation have contributed in one way or another to hustle culture, and of course myself included. And it would be interesting to know if you guys have done any of the following from the list on this slide. So for example, glorifying, sacrificing our mental and physical health for success, judging others for prioritizing their mental health, exaggerating our accomplishments, normalizing hustle culture in everyday life, like saying this is just part of being a student, quantifying success with numbers, performance, and grades. And this can also involve things like judging people for taking, let's say, like a reduced course load or taking a day or two off for their mental health. I know for me, I'm definitely guilty of saying something like, oh, like I almost got no sleep last night because I was trying to like finish this assignment or study for the exam, or like I'm personally in computer science, so it's like, oh, I like how many lead code problems have you done? And those sort of things can, I guess, lead to propagation of burnout, whether we really mean to or not. Yeah, Claire said, not me listing random minors in my LinkedIn and listing it as something candidate to make me seem more well-rounded. Yeah. And Patricia says, yeah, a lot of people almost compete on who had the least amount of sleep. Yeah, I definitely agree. And as we will cover on later in the slide, sleep is very, very important. I'm sure you all know. And Brooks says, I often feel very guilty if I'm not constantly doing schoolwork. So I try to relieve this guilt by participating in hustle culture. Yeah, I agree. Sometimes I just want to take a rest, but I can often feel guilty when everyone else seems to be working hard. Yeah, which just makes mental health worse in the long run. I fully agree.
Can I jump in?
Yep.
I'm just loving this. And you know, I had this thought. I read an article in the recent past that sort of alluded to why there's so much pressure on people who are in post-secondary education. And it made a link between the housing market and how insanely impossible it is basically to buy property in this day and age, and that the trickle down effect of that is extreme competition at your level, because who's going to rise to the top and be able to actually afford buying property, which in other generations just wasn't a consideration. And it made me think about, you know, dealing with individual issues on a one-to-one, like the kind of work that I do. And I wouldn't necessarily see the anxiety arising out of hustle culture as like a pathology in a person, like, oh, you need to change as a person, but rather an indication of like an entire system that feels broken. So kind of taking out the, oh, great, my mental health is like another thing that I have to add to my to-do list to try to get it in tip-top shape and feel like, you know, like I can do this, and rather like we are all kind of victims of a broken system. That's like a larger conversation, but I wanted to just offer that as another angle of looking at it.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. I think that's a great point. And yeah, I can see how the increase in housing costs and just people are sort of forced to become more competitive in order to survive in today's society. And yeah, I agree. There's seems to be a lot of societal factors that promote hustle culture and burnout.
Yeah, that's a really awesome point. Thank you so much for sharing that. That really got me thinking as well. I'm from Toronto, so I have grown up with, especially my dad, sending me news articles pretty much every day, like the housing market, you're never going to be able to find a property, like you will be like 50 by the time you can afford a 1-bedroom apartment, like crazy stuff. So the fact that we're kind of shifting this narrative onto a broader spectrum, to like branching out to a broken system, is, I think that's honestly like a huge root of hustle culture for sure. So that's an awesome point. Thank you so much for that. All right, awesome. Thank you so much for everybody's participation. And we will move on now. So you're starting to feel burnout and you're probably wondering what to do next. So let's talk about some tips to combat burnout.
So when you start to feel the characteristic exhaustion that burnout makes you feel, the most important step is to go back to the 3 basics. And when we say basics, we mean you need to prioritize what's called your core 3, which is sleeping, eating, and movement. And so as for sleep, interesting New York Times article writes that sleep serves many purposes, including regulating our mood, clearing waste from our brain, and re-energizing ourselves. And that is why sleep deprivation is one of the biggest risk factors for developing burnout. And improving sleep quality can help individuals with even clinical burnout recover enough to return to work. So clearly, sleep is very important. And what do we mean by improving your sleep quality? It means prioritizing your sleep. Try and create a bedtime and wake up time that you're faithful to. So basically make a pattern of good sleeping and practice sleep hygiene. Keep a cooler temperature in your room. Try and make your room as dark as possible, and be serious about limiting your technology usage, minimum an hour before sleeping. And eating is also very important. Eat foods that power and energize you. Your food choices affect the energy you have in your body and the thoughts that you experience throughout the day. And so choose foods that will nourish you, and at minimum, prioritize to have at least 1 healthy meal a day. And also drink a lot of water, get water in your system. So keep water in the areas you frequent. So for example, your nightstand, your bathroom, your study area, to make sure that you don't forget to drink. And develop a regular eating schedule to ensure that you have no crashes in energy. And also movement is very important. And yeah, so prioritize movement outside. Even 5 or 10 minutes of outdoor exercise a day can have meaningful psychological impact, and make a goal of 20 to 30 minutes of exercise every day. And this can improve overall mental health.
American journalist Chuck Palahniuk once said to find joy in everything you choose to do, every job, relationship, home, it's your responsibility to love it or change it. So one of the best ways to both prevent burnout and to mitigate it is to find little ways to add little joys into your life. And you can do this by creating a joy list, which is a list of activities that make you feel happy or that give you a moment of peace. Incorporate 3 to 4 of these activities into your daily routine to give you little bursts of joy every day. So for example, getting a coffee, going for a walk, scheduling a FaceTime with a friend, watching an episode of Netflix, whatever that may be. And something on my joy list right now personally is hanging out with my 2 pet bunnies.
So in the age of quarantine, the boundaries between our workspace and our homes have become completely blurred, as a lot of us either study from home or attend classes from home or work from home if you are doing work learning or co-op or whatnot. And this means that we can spend a great amount of time in the exact same spaces every day. And this can have an extremely detrimental effect on our mental health and can certainly put anyone in a quote unquote funk. And it is important to try and change up where you're spending your time. Try changing your workspace to somewhere different, or commit to doing different work tests in different spots. One of the best tips which is suggest is to prioritize having time outside every day, as sunlight has an extremely restorative effects on our mental health. And if you can, try and spend some time in nature, specifically in forest settings, as the forest has great stress relieving properties.
It's also super important to schedule free time. So every week, prioritize scheduling a morning or evening or a full day where you are not doing work. These activities should be as different as possible from your work tasks, and don't be afraid to schedule time to do absolutely nothing.
So it is also important to implement the morning routine, as it has once been said that if you win the morning, you win the day. And one of the ways you can win morning is to have an intentional morning routine. And this can be as long or as short as you want, but having a routine gives your brain to buffer between sleep and starting work. It's like allowing yourself to have some you time. But the point is to dedicate time every morning for you to engage in some activities that help you recharge and prepare for the rest of the day. And self-help author Robin Sharma in his book called The 5 a.m. Club recommends structuring your morning routine with first 20 minutes of movement that makes you sweat, and 20 minutes of reflection with an activity like journaling or meditating, and 20 minutes of learning with an activity like reading.
It's also really important to make it a priority to add some aspect of social connection into your schedule, weekly or bi-weekly. So face-to-face connection includes FaceTime with friends, going out for a meal with friends, or going out for a walk.
And if you're continuously experiencing burnout, it's time to look at your situation. So it's good to seek mentorship and advice from people who have the skills you want to have. For example, like reaching out to students who have excellent time management skills and are always able to get assignments in early. And I can ask these students and find out what their technique is. Maybe that can help you as well. And long checklists induce anxiety for a lot of people, and it is good to narrow the checklist down to three to six priority items that you need to get done right now, and focus on those small number of items only, so you can focus on one task at a time. And it's good to remember that everyone is different. This means that everyone works differently, and what may work for someone else may not work for you. And the priority is focusing on what works for you. And so that means reassessing how many courses you're taking or how much you're agreeing to take on at work. And it's good to know your limits and stay within them. There's no shame in that. And doing a few items with high quality is much better than several things in poor quality. So it's important and good to set boundaries with yourself.
When it comes to your well-being, there are a variety of resources available for you. With that in mind, the first resource is Ams Peer Support, which provides one-on-one confidential peer support with trained volunteers like us. These volunteers are often students just like you and can empathize with feeling burnt out. There's also the Wellness Center, which offers IBPOC wellness peers. You can also speak to a wellness peer to talk about your own well-being and explore support options. There's also SAP, which stands for Student Assistant Program, and it has replaced Empower Me. SAP is a 24/7 wellness service that provides single session counselors that you can contact through phone, an app, or via online chat. Lastly, there's also Here to Talk, and this enables you to get connected with a counselor. And Claire has kindly pasted some links in the chat, so feel free to check those out.
And I want to briefly talk about Campus Lightbox specifically. And Campus Lightbox is a UBC specific resource directory for students. And it's a great resource if you need directory of mental health, wellness, academic, or health resources. So what you see on the slide is sort of how the website looks like. And so on the left, you can filter the resources by cost, type of issue, urgency / wait time, severity, and accessibility needs. And there is even a resource recommender on the bottom right that you can use to get recommended resources. And yeah, so that's basically Campus Lightbox, and I recommend that you guys try visiting the website and just taking a look if you have not yet already.
In terms of academic resources, if you are burnt out, there are resources to help when it comes to effective studying, but where you get concessions will vary depending on your faculty. For example, there are faculty-specific advising offices, and aside from providing guidance on planning your degree, they also handle concessions. The office you speak to get a concession will depend on what faculty you're in. So I'm a psych major, so I would contact arts advising, or if I were a bio major, I'd contact science advising, etc. So concessions include extensions for assignments or papers, makeup tests or quizzes, late withdrawal. Alternatively, if you are registered with the Center for Accessibility, you are eligible for accommodations such as note takers, where someone in your class takes notes for you. And that can really help if you feel overwhelmed by the content and are struggling to take notes. Remember, that's not a free pass to not attend class, so be sure to still go. It can also include extensions and peer tutors who can help give you studying tips and tricks. Another great resource is AMS tutoring, and they offer a few things: free group tutoring, paid private tutoring, and exam review sessions. Another great resource is UBC's faculty-specific peer academic coaches. In general, they provide advice on goal setting, study habits, time management techniques, and plans of action for studying. And there are also academic coaches for the arts and science students. Finally, for forestry and LFS students, there are peer-assisted study sessions, which are free study group sessions for those who want to understand course concepts and develop study strategies for the specific subject matter. They are facilitated by upper year forestry and LFS students. Additionally, commerce students also have their own version of peer-assisted study sessions led by upper year commerce students.
Oops. So if you're not aware, oftentimes professors may not require you to go to your academic advising office to get an extension. So we have some tips on emailing your professors to ask for extension. Firstly, obviously be professional. Address your professor in the way they prefer to be addressed. Some professors are on a first name basis, whereas other professors would prefer to be referred to as a doctor or a professor. And introduce yourself first by saying your name, student number, and include the class code and section number, because professors get a lot of emails, and sometimes or oftentimes they teach more than one class. So it's good to know, it's good for them to know what class you're in, and try not to wait until the very last minute. Professors aren't always checking their emails every hour, so they might get your email after the due date. And obviously, if you ask earlier, it shows that you have been thinking about the assignment and it shows initiative. However, sometimes we don't expect to be burnt out a week before the deadline, and things may come up. So we sometimes do have to end up emailing last minute. And so with that in mind, it's always important to explain your situation concisely and honestly, regardless of when you ask for an extension. And remember that professors were students before too, and usually know that we students are going through a lot. And finally, always conclude by thanking your professor for their time and for considering this extension. It's obviously good to be polite, and it shows that you acknowledge their time and recognize that they may be busy as well, and potentially getting an extension might impact their marking.
Awesome. So before we wrap up, are there any further questions or comments, concerns, anything? Just to bring your attention to the chat, there's a lot of useful information there. So be sure to check all of those out. Thank you so much everyone for your participation today. It was super awesome.
Yeah, if no one has any further questions. And Brooke says, I loved all the suggestions of simple morning daily habits to help. Yeah, thank you everyone for participating, and I think there were a lot of great discussions that we had.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. This is very, very informative and a lot of great strategies to tackle this issue, since we just all face it sooner or later. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would ask you to stop sharing. So, okay. A quick announcement before we end. For those who may be interested, LFA's event community is hosting another event. Next slide. We have the information posted, you guys. It's next Tuesday, November 23 from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. about is the graduate school right for me? So you can use the link to register for the event if you like. Yeah, this is the slide, and the link will again be posted in chat later on. And this is the end of today's anxiety workshop. I hope you gained something from the workshop and have one thing in plan that you can do after this. I really appreciate you all joining for today. It's a pleasure to organizing this event with my colleagues. And special thanks to Nicole and Ams Peer Support for your contribution. And also all the participants, thank you for all your contributions and participations. And having said this, we just have a few minutes before leaving. I would ask you guys to complete the feedback survey. The link is sent out in the chat, and also there is the QR code that you can scan. And for those who may have additional questions, feel free to contact Nicole at her one-on-one counseling sessions or reach out to Ams Peer Support and all those wonderful resources that we mentioned before. And please feel free to review the links that we posted in chat. And once again, thank you all for being participating and have been just great. Yeah, have a great evening, all you guys. Yeah, thank you.